From the tales of the Mabinogi, known as the Mabinogion, Branwen, daughter of Llyr. Bran, which means raven, the blessed son of Llyr. Llyr is Irish for the sea. So the raven of the sea was crowned king of this island, having been raised to the throne of London. One afternoon he was at a court of his at Hardleck in Ardudwy. He was sitting on the rock of Hardleck overlooking the sea, accompanied by his brother Manawydan, son of Llyr, and his two brothers on his mother's side, Nisien and Evnisien, and such noblemen as ought to be surround a king. The two brothers on his mother's side were the sons of Euroswede, and Bran's mother Penarden, daughter of Beli, son of Minogan. One of these youths was a good lad, for he would make peace between the most hostile of forces, and his name was Nisien. Evnisien, however, would bring about fighting between the most loving of brothers. As these nobles were sitting thus, and they saw 13 ships coming from the south of Ireland and making for the coast, moving easily and swiftly, running before the wind and approaching rapidly. "I see a ship out there making boldly for our land," said Bran. "Tell the men of the court to equip themselves and go learn of what our visitors want." The men made ready and descended to the ships below, and seeing them close up, they were certain they had never seen ships better turned out than these, with their fine, graceful, handsome ensigns of brocade. They could see one of the ships drawing ahead of the others, and on that ship a shield was raised above the deck, with the point uppermost as a sign of peace. The strangers made for land in order to talk. They put out boats and sailed in to shore and greeted the king, who could hear everything from his seat on the rock above. "God be good to you," said Bran, "and may you be welcome. Whose host of ships is this, and who is your leader?" "Lord Malawick." "King of Ireland is here, and these are his ships." "What is it he wishes? Will he come ashore?" "No, lord," they said. "He has a request for you, and unless you grant it, he will not come." "What is this request?" asked Bran. "Lord, he wishes to make an alliance with you. He has come to ask for Branwen." Branwen meaning white breast, which appeared once in the text, may be the original form. Branwen. Daughter of Llyr, daughter of the sea. "And if you wish, he will ally the island of the mighty," meaning Britain, "with Ireland, so that both will become stronger." "Then let him come ashore while we discuss the matter," answered Bran. That answer went back to Malawick, who replied, I will gladly come. He came ashore and was welcomed, and between his host and Bran's there was a great multitude in the court that night. First thing the next day, the men of the island of the mighty held a council, and their decision was to give Malowick Branwen. She was one of the three great queens. The footnote says, or perhaps ancestors, though Branwen has no descendants. So one of the three great ancestors of the island, and the most beautiful girl in the world. A time was set for the couple to sleep together, and everyone set out. Malowick and his host in their ships, Bran and his party by land, until they all reached Aberfraw. Aber meaning estuary. There the feast began, and this is how they sat. The king of the island of the mighty, with Mabinogion, son of Llyr, on one side of him, and Malowick on the other, and Branwen next to Malowick. They feasted not in a house, but in tents, for Bran had never been able to fit inside any house. They began to carouse and to talk, and when they perceived it was better to sleep than to continue carousing, they went to bed, and that night Malowick slept with Branwen. The next day the entire complement of the court rose, and the household officers began to discuss the quartering of Malowick's horses and grooms. And these were then quartered in every region as far as the sea. One day, Evnisian, the quarrelsome man we mentioned above, happened upon the quarters of Malowick's horses, and asked whose animals they were. "These are the horses of Malowick, king of Ireland," replied the grooms. "What are they doing here?" "The king of Ireland himself is here. He has slept with your sister Branwen, and these are his horses." "Have they given away so excellent a girl as my sister without my consent?" said Evnisian. "They could not have hit upon a greater insult." Straightway he struck at the horses. He cut their lips through to the teeth, and their ears down to their heads, and their tails through their backs. And when he could get a hold of their eyelids, he cut them through to the bone. Thus the horses were so badly disfigured that they were no use to anyone. News of this deed reached Malowick. He was told how his horses had been maimed and disfigured, so that there was no profit to be had from them. "Well, Lord?" asked one Irishman. "They have insulted you, and the insult was intended." "God knows," said Malowick. "I marvel, though, that when they contemplated this insult, they first gave me a girl as excellent and noble and beloved as her people, as Branwen is." "Lord, you see it made plain," said another man. "There is nothing for you to do but make for the ships." So they sought the ships. News reached Bran that Malowick was leaving the court, though he had neither asked permission nor received it, and so messengers left to ask the king of Ireland why. Idig, son of Anaward, and Hevyed the Tall were the messengers who went. They overtook Malowick and inquired about his intentions and why he was leaving. "God knows," he answered. Had I only known, I should not have come here. Still, a strange thing has happened to me. What is that? First I was given a wife, Branwen, daughter of Llyr, one of the three great queens of this island, and the daughter of the king of the island, of the mighty. And then I was insulted. I find it strange that the intended insult was not done before so excellent a girl as she was given to me. God knows, Lord, no one at court, no counselor desired that you be insulted, and though you consider it an insult, this affront and trick has offended Bran even more than it has you. Well, I suppose that is true, said Malowick. Nevertheless, he cannot retract the insult. The messengers took that answer to Bran and told him that Malowick had said. Well, said the king, we are undone if he goes away angry. Therefore we will not let him go. Then send more messengers after him, Lord. That I will. Manaodan, son of Llyr, Hevydd the tall, Unig strong shoulder, rise and go after Malowick. Tell him that he shall have a sound horse for every one that was injured, and moreover, as an honor price, a silver staff as thick as his little finger and as tall as himself, and a golden plate as broad as his face. Tell him what sort of man did this, and how it was done against my will. Tell him that my half-brother did it, and that it would not be easy for me to have him killed or destroyed. Or let Malowick come to see me, and I will make peace on whatever terms he likes. The messengers went after Malowick and repeated these words in a friendly way, and he listened to them. Men, he said then, let us hold counsel. They did that, and the conclusion they came to was that if they rejected the offer, they would more likely to suffer greater shame than to obtain a greater reparation. So Malowick decided to accept the offer, and the Irish returned to the court in peace. The tents and pavilions were arranged as if in a hall, and they went to eat, and as they had sat at the beginning of the feast, so they sat now. Malowick and Bran began to talk, but Bran found his companion's conversation listless and uninspired, whereas the man had been full of constant good cheer prior to the insult. He supposed that the Irish chieftain considered the compensation too meagre, so he said, Sir, you are not a good talker tonight as you were earlier. If it is because you feel your compensation is too small, then I will increase it as much as you wish, and the horses will be made over to you tomorrow. God reward you, Lord, said Malowick. I will add even more to your compensation, said Bran, for I will give you a cauldron, the property of which is this. Take a man who has been slain today and throw him into it, and tomorrow he will fight as well as ever, only he will not be able to speak. Malowick thanked Bran and felt exceedingly pleased with the gift. The next day the horses were made over to him as long as there were tamed horses to be had, and then the journey to another commot. They journeyed to another commot. A commot is a subdivision of a cantreve, where he was given colts until the payment was complete. That commot was known as Tal Ebolion, meaning end of the ridges, and it was known as that ever after. As the hosts sat together on the second night, Malowick asked, Lord, where did you find the cauldron which you have given me? And Bran answered, I got it from a man who was in your country, and for all I know it was there he found it. Who is that? Lasar Laes Gingwyd. He came here with his wife, Kimedi Kimelvol, after their escape from an iron house in Ireland. The house was made white hot round them, but they escaped from it. I am surprised that you know nothing of this. I do know, Lord, said Malowick, and as much as I know I will tell you. I was hunting in Ireland one day, at the top of a mound which overlooks a lake called the Lake of the Cauldron, and I saw a huge man with yellow-red hair emerging from the lake with the cauldron on his back. He was a great monstrous man with an evil, thieving look about him. His wife followed, and if he was huge, she was twice as big. They drew near and greeted me, and I asked, How goes it with you? This is how it goes with us, Lord, the man said. In a month and a fortnight this woman will conceive, and the boy that she bears at that time will be a fully armed warrior. I took them with me and maintained them, and they stayed with me for a year. For that first year I kept them willingly, but thereafter they became a burden to me. By the end of the 4th month of the 2nd year, they had caused themselves to be hated and detested throughout the land. They committed outrages and harassed and importuned gentlemen and ladies. My subjects gathered round to ask that I part with these people, and bade me choose between my realm and the strangers. I referred the matter to the council of the country to see what should be done, for the strangers would not go of their own will, and because of their fighting ability there was no need for them to go against their will. In these difficult circumstances it was decided to make a chamber entirely of iron. When this was ready, all the smiths of Ireland were summoned to bring their hammers and tongs, and charcoal was piled up to the top of the chamber. Inside, the man and his wife and their children were served with great quantities of food and drink until it was clear that they were all drunk, whereupon those outside began to fire the charcoal round the chamber and work the bellows round the house. There was one man to each bellows, and these men blew until the house was white hot round its occupants. The strangers inside held a council in the middle of the chamber. They waited until the wall was white hot, and then the man, by reason of his great strength, was able to rush it and break it down with his shoulder, so that he and his wife alone escaped. After that, I suppose, the couple came over to you, Lord. Indeed, he did come here, said Bran, and he gave the cauldron to me. How did you receive them, Lord? I quartered them in every part of the realm, and they are numerous and prosper everywhere. Wherever they are, they fortify the place with the best men and arms anyone has seen. That night they continued to talk and sing and carouse as long as they liked, and when they saw that it was better to sleep than to continue sitting up, they went to bed. Thus they spent an enjoyable feast, and when it ended, Malowick and Branwen set out. 13 ships left Aber Menay and sailed for Ireland, where they were greeted with great rejoicing. No gentleman or lady of Ireland who came to visit Branwen left without being given a brooch or ring or treasured royal jewel, and it was a marvelous sight to watch these being carried off. Little wonder then that Branwen acquired a great reputation in the course of the year, or that she flourished in honor and with many friends. Meanwhile it happened that she became pregnant, and when the proper time came, she gave birth to a son. They named him Gwern, meaning alder, son of Malowick, and set him to be fostered in the best place for men in Ireland. At the end of the second year, however, people began to grumble about the insult that Malowick had sustained in Wales, about the disgrace that he had suffered due to the maimed horses. His foster brothers and closest friends taunted him and made no effort to conceal their feelings. Ultimately, there was such an uproar in the land that there was no peace for him until he avenged the outrage. This is the revenge they took. Branwen was driven from her husband's chamber and made to cook for the court. And the butcher came every day, after he had finished cutting up the meat, to box her ear, and that was her punishment. Now, Lord, said the Irish, forbid all ships and coracles from going to Wales, and impound those boats which arrive from Wales, so that news of Branwen might not spread. And that was done. Not less than 3 years passed thus, during which time Branwen reared a starling on the edge of her kneading trough. Kneading trough, maybe. She taught it words and told it what sort of man her brother was, and then she brought a letter telling of the punishment and disgrace she was suffering. She fashioned it to the base of the starling's wing and sent the bird to Wales. When it arrived at this island, it found Bran at an assembly of his at Caer Saint Yin Arvon, meaning the Roman Saguntium. It alighted on his shoulder and ruffled its wings until the letter was noticed, and they perceived that the bird had been reared in a house. The letter was taken and looked at, and when it was read, Bran was saddened to hear of Branwen's disgrace, and immediately he began to muster the island. He had the full complement of 154 districts assemble, and he himself complained of the punishment his sister was being made to undergo. They held a council and decided to set out for Ireland, leaving 7 men behind as leaders, with Caradog, son of Bran, as chief, and 7 horsemen as well. These last were left in Edirnion, for which reason the town is called Sieth Marchaug, meaning 7 horsemen. The 7 leaders were Caradog, son of Bran, Heveid the Tall, Unig Strong Shoulder, Edig, son of Anard Curly Hair, Fodor, son of Ervil, Wilk Bonelip, and Lassar, son of Lassar Laes Gilgwid, and the chieftain of David, who was a young lad with them. Now there's a footnote saying that these characters have switched their ages. So one who was previously the chieftain of David is Pryderi's foster father in a previous story, but he is a lad, and the other person is a man in this story. I think this is an indication of how story can be mirrored, as a characters can be mirrored, and if this is cosmic symbolism, then this is possibly a play on the grammar of the cosmos. These 7 stayed behind as stewards in charge of the island, and Cardog, son of Bran, was their chief steward. Bran and the host we spoke of set sail for Ireland, and since the sea was not too deep, he waded through. At that time there was only 2 rivers, Llyr and Archan, but thereafter the sea widened and overflowed the kingdoms. Bran took all the string musicians on his back and made for Ireland. One day Malowic's swineherds were by the sea, watching over their pigs, and the sight they saw caused them to run to their king. "Greetings, Lord," they said. "God be good to you," said Malowick. "What news have you?" "Lord, we have wondrous news. We have seen a forest upon the sea, where we never before saw such as one tree." "A strange thing that. Did you see anything else?" "Lord, we did. We saw a huge mountain close to the forest, and it was moving. There was a high ridge on the mountain, and a lake on either side of the ridge, and a forest and a mountain, and everything were all moving." "Well," said Malowick, "no one here would know anything of that except possibly Branwen. Go ask her." The messengers went to Branwen and said, "Lady, what do you make of this?" "Though I am no lady, I know what it is. The men of the Island of the Mighty have heard of my disgrace and are coming." "What is the forest that was seen on the sea?" "The masts and yardarms of the ships." "Alas! What is the mountain that is seen alongside the ships?" "That was my brother Bran wading to shore. There was no ship to which he could fit." "What was the high ridge and the lakes on either side of the ridge?" "He was looking at this island, for he is angry. The 2 lakes on either side of the ridge are his 2 eyes on either side of his nose." This caused the fighting men of Ireland and the coastal areas to assemble hastily and hold a council. "Lord," said his men, "you have no choice but to retreat across the Llyr, a river in Ireland." Now, the Llyr in this footnote, Llynon, which must represent either the Llyr or the Shannon. As the Llyr flows into the Irish Sea, it is not suitable line of defense. Moreover, Llynon might be an approximation of the Irish Shannon or Shannon. On the other hand, the placing of hurdles upon Bran clearly refers to the Bailey Atha Claath, Dublin in Irish, or the town of the Hurdle Ford. "And they put a river between you and Bran, and then destroy the bridge. There are lodestones at the bottom of the river, so that no ship or other vessel can cross it." The Irish retreated across the river and destroyed the bridge, and when Bran and his ships reached land and crossed to the river bank, his men said to him, "Lord, you know the property of this river. No one can cross it, nor is there any bridge. What do you propose for a bridge?" "Simply this," said Bran. "Let him who is a chief be a bridge." This is the first time these words were spoken, and the proverb is still current. Bran then lay down across the river, and hurdles were placed upon him, and so the host crossed over the top of him. As soon as he rose, there were Malawic's messengers approaching, greeting him and saluting him as Malawic's kinsman, and assuring him that through their king's goodwill nothing but good would befall him. "Malowic is giving the kingship to your nephew Gwern, the son of your sister, and will invest him in your presence to make up for the wrong and the injury done to Branwen. So, either here or in the island of the mighty, whichever you wish, make some provision for Malowic." "Well, if I cannot obtain the kingship for myself," said Bran, "perhaps I will call a council to discuss your offer. You shall have no answer from me until you bring a different proposal." "We will bring you the best answer we can, if you will wait for it." "I will wait, as long as you return quickly," answered Bran. The messengers returned to Malowic and said, "Lord, prepare a better answer for Bran, for he would have none of the one we took him." "What is your advice, men?" "Lord, there is only one choice. Bran has never fitted inside a house. Build one in his honor, so that it will contain the men of the island of the mighty in one half, and your men in the other. Then place the kingship at his disposal and before his men. The honor of having a house into which he can fit, for he has never yet had one, will induce him to make peace with you." The messengers took that proposal to Bran. He held a council, with the result that he accepted. This was due to the pleading of Branwen, who feared that otherwise the land would be laid waste. The peace was made, and the house was built large and sturdy, but the Irish set a trap. They fixed a peg on every one of the 100 pillars in the house, and hung a leather bag on each peg, and put an armed man in every bag. When Evnissyen entered the house ahead of the men of the island of the mighty, he examined it with a ferocious, merciless stare, and he noticed the leather bags along the posts. "What is in this bag?" he asked an Irishman, and the man answered, "Flour, friend." Whereupon Evnissyen fumbled with the bag until he found the warrior's head, and then he squeezed it until he perceived his fingers sinking through the bone and into the brain. He moved on and put his hand in another bag and asked, "What is in here?" And the Irishman answered, "Flour." Evnissyen played the same trick on every warrior until of the 200 men there was only one left alive. When he came to the last bag, he asked, "What is this?" And the Irishman answered, "Flour, friend." Evnissyen fumbled about until he found the head, and as he had squeezed the others, so he squeezed this one, and he perceived that it wore armor. He did not leave the man until he had killed him, and then he sang this Englian, or a kind of verse, Englian. "There is in these bags a kind of flour, champions, fighters, attackers in battle, warriors ready for the foe." Then the host entered the house. The men of Ireland went into one half, and the men of the island of the mighty into the other. As soon as they had sat down, they made peace, and the boy was invested with the kingship. When the peace had been concluded, Bran called the boy over to him. From Bran, Gwern went to Manaudon, and everyone who saw the boy loved him. Nisien, son of Iroswyd, called the boy to him from Manaudon to him, and Gwern went willingly. At that, Evnissyen said, "Why does my nephew, the son of my sister, not come to me?" "Let him go gladly," said Bran, and Gwern went gladly. By my confession to God, thought Evnissyen, this outrage I am about to commit is one the household would never expect. He rose and took Gwern by the feet, and at once, before a man in the house could lay a hand on him, he thrust the boy head first into the flames. When Branwen saw her son burning in the fire, she made as if to leap after him from where she sat between her two brothers, but Bran seized her with one hand and his shield with the other. Everyone in the house sprang up, and there arose the greatest commotion ever caused by a host in one house, as everyone reached for his arms. This was when pierced thighs, now pierced thighs is capitalized, possibly a reference to Bran anticipating his wound, or perhaps mighty thigh. This was when pierced thigh said, "Dogs of Gwern," or the dogs of Alder, "beware of pierced thighs." As each man went after his weapons, Bran protected Branwen between his shield and his shoulder. The Irish, however, began to kindle a fire under the cauldron of rebirth. Corpses were thrown in until it was full. The next morning, the warriors sprang forth as fierce as ever, except that they could not speak. When Evnissyen saw these corpses and no room anywhere in the cauldron for the men of the island of the mighty, he thought, "Alas, God, wretched am I who brought this about on the men of the island of the mighty, and shame on me if I do not seek to deliver them." He crept in among the Irish dead, and two bare-bottomed Irishmen found him and threw him in with the rest. Evnissyen stretched out inside the cauldron until he broke it into 4 pieces, and then his heart broke also. Consequently, such victory as there was went to the men of the island of the mighty, though there was no victory save for the escape of 7 men. And to that Bran had been wounded in the foot with a poisoned spear. The 7 who escaped were Pryderi, Manaudwan, Glinio, son of Taran, Taliesin, Ynaug, Grodew, son of Muriel, and Helyon, son of Gwyn the Old. Bran commanded them to cut off his head. "Take my head," he said, "and carry it to the White Hill," or the Tower Hill, or perhaps where St. Paul's now stands, says this footnote. "Carry it to the White Hill in London, and bury it there with the face turned towards France. You will be a long time on the road. You will spend 7 years feasting at Hardleck, with the birds of Rhiannon singing to you, and the head will be as good a companion as it ever was. After that you will spend 8 years at Gwales in Penvro, and as long as you do not open the door to the Bristol Channel on the side facing Cornwall, you may stay there, and the head will not decay. Once you have opened the door, however, you must not delay, but set out at once to bury the head in London. Now, however, you must cross the sea." So they cut off the head and made to cross the sea with it, the 7 of them and Branwen. They landed at Aber Allah in Tal Ebellion and sat down and rested. But Branwen looked at Ireland and the island of the mighty, at what she could see of them, and said, "Alas, Son of God, woe that I was ever born, for 2 good islands have been destroyed on my account." And with that her heart broke. They made a 4-sided grave and buried her on the bank of the Allah. Then the 7 took the head and set out for Hardleck. And they journeyed along, and as they journeyed along, a company of men and women approached. "What news?" asked Mabinogion. "None," they answered, "except that Caswallon, son of Beli, has conquered the island of the mighty, and is a crowned king in London." "What has happened to Cardog, son of Bran, and the men who were left with him?" "Caswallon fell upon them and killed 6, and Cardog's heart broke with despair at seeing the sword killing the men and not knowing who was doing it. Caswallon had clothed himself in a magic cloak so that no one could see him killing the men, only the sword. However, he did not want to kill Cardog, who was his nephew, his sister's son. Cardog was thus one of the 3 who broke their hearts with grief. The chieftain of Dyved, who was a youth with the 7 men, escaped into the forest. The 7 then continued on to Hardleck, where they sat down and began to enjoy food and drink. As they did so, 3 birds appeared and began to sing, and all the singing they had ever heard was nothing compared to this. They looked far out over the ocean to see the birds, yet they saw as clearly as if the creatures were close at hand. 7 years passed thus, and at the end of that time they set out for Gwales in Penvro, where they found a great, handsome royal hall overlooking the sea. They entered and found 2 doors open and the 3rd closed, the one on the Cornwall side. "There is the door we must not open," said Mabinogion. They spent the night in joyous feasting, and remembered nothing of all the grief they had seen and suffered, and nothing of any other sorrow in the world. 8 years they spent at Gwales, and they could not remember having spent a happier or more joyful time. Never was it more tedious than when they first arrived, nor could any tell by looking at his companions that it had been so long, nor was having the head there more disagreeable than when Bran had been alive and with them. By reason of the 8 years, this was called the Assembly of the Wondrous Head, while the one which went to Ireland was called the Assembly of Branwen and Malowick. One day, Llyr, son of Gwyn, said, "Shame on my beard if I do not open this door to see if what is said about it is true." He opened the door and looked out at Bristol and the Bristol Channel and Cornwall. And as he did, so they all became as conscious of every loss they had suffered, for every friend and relative they had lost, of every ill that had befallen them, as if it had all just happened. Above all, they felt for their Lord. From that moment they could not rest. They took the head and set out at once for London. However long they were on the road, they came at last to London, and buried the head in the White Hill, and that burial was one of the three happy concealments, capital three happy concealments, and one of the three unhappy disclosures, capital three unhappy disclosures, when it was disclosed. For while the head was concealed, no plague came across the sea to the island. According to the story, this is the tale of the men who went to Ireland. In Ireland, meanwhile, there was not a man left alive, only 5 pregnant women in a cave in the wilderness, and these women all bore sons at the same moment. The boys were reared until they grew into big lads. Their thoughts turned to women, and they desired to take wives. So each one, in turn, slept with his companions' mothers. They lived in the land and ruled it and divided it among the 5 of them. And because of that division, the 5 parts of Ireland are still called fifths. They scourged the land wherever there had been battles. They found gold and silver and became wealthy. So ends this branch of the Mabinogi, about the blow struck at Branwen, one of the 3 unhappy blows of the island, about the assembly of Bran, wherein the hosts of 154 districts went to Ireland to avenge that blow, about the 7 years' feasting in the Hardlick, about the singing of the birds of Rhiannon, and about the assembly of the head, which lasted 8 years.